Hello, livestock friends, and welcome to this edition of Before the Bid. This is a podcast dedicated to the livestock sales industry where we go behind the scenes of the operation and speak straight to the sellers. We discuss topics about the important aspects of their operation, location, the people behind the prep work, and talk about some of the animals that will be offered to you, the prospective buyers. Hopefully, you've got your sale catalog close by. You might have to go look through that pile on your desk. But if not, then you're probably like me and driving down the road or busy with chores around the farm. And that's okay too. Wherever you are and whatever you're doing, I hope you enjoy this segment of Before the Bid. I'm your host, Andy Howell. Welcome, livestock friends, to this edition of Before the Bid podcast. And as usual, I am very excited to talk to the guest today that we have on the podcast, and a guy that he and I go way back, and he's actually one of the biggest influences of what I do and in the path that I took. And so I'm very excited to talk to this guy. We're gonna go into the sheep world today, and we're gonna talk to a guy that for 31 years has been the beef and sheep specialist at Hawkeye Community College. This guy has set up numerous scholarship programs. He's set up and run many shows for college students and for scholarship situations. He's put on a lot of sales for the same thing and for himself. And he has his own sheep flock, of course, and has some sales. He's put together travel seminars. I was a student on some of those travel seminars, and also a guy that developed and started the adult lamb and wool program. So a guy that I am very, very excited to talk to today. And also he has a sale coming up on April 25th. And that sale is going to be through Willoughby Online Sales. And today my guest is Mr. Bob Kimm from Missouri. Bob, and how are things out in Missouri today, Bob?
Well, it's a beautiful day. The sun's out, and it's kind of a brisk 50-degree day.
That's good. Got things getting ready for the sale and things going with that, and we got some pictures and things, and we're going to talk about those here in just a little bit. But Bob, I know you and I could talk for about 3 hours about all the things that you've done to help juniors out and help students out, and the sheep program and the sheep industry and the cattle industry in general. But we'll try to keep that a little bit shorter here, and we'll get to some of those sheep later on. But if you would, tell us a little bit about some of the history of the sheep flock, and I know you used to be in Dysart, Iowa. That's where you and I got together, and I was actually, guys, I was actually honored to work for Bob for a year or two. And Bob, you had that flock in Dysart, and now you moved it to Willow Springs, Missouri. And give us just a little bit of background about that, if you would.
Well, I started at Hawkeye in 1969, and of course, by 73, my wife had convinced me that if we're going to have livestock, which I had on a suburb of Waterloo, we better buy a property where she could see me and get a hold of me, and instead of wondering where I was at. So we bought the acreage at Dysart and moved down there from Waterloo in 73. And when I started, actually back before we moved to Dysart, I had a flock of commercial blackface ewes, and was plugging away in 1970 and 71. Really liked carcass events, so I took livestock. I took consignments to the National Lamb Show, which was held up in Albert Lea, Minnesota at that time, and got along really well. And that was that, along with the Iowa Ram Test, was where I really cut my teeth in terms of getting a position in the Suffolk breed. But by 72, I bought some registered ewes from a dispersal sale. Burton Howland was a group of ranchers out of Idaho that had a dispersal sale in Des Moines, Iowa during a blizzard. And I was fortunate enough to buy about 15 ewes that day. They closed the sale down after about 30, and they had more than 200 to sell. But I was fortunate enough to get 15 ewes, and that was the start of my registered Suffolk flock. And then from then on, it just grew. And by the latter part of the 70s, I had well up over 100 ewes, and I ran between 100 to 125 all the years that I was at Advisor.
And you also had also developed some satellite herds and different things like that as well, correct?
Right. I mean, as the sales that I started in the early years were private treaty sales, and by the mid 80s, it was evident that there were people all wanting to come at the farm and buy particular animals at the same time, and you can't appease everybody. Someone's got to be first, and someone's going to be second, and so I decided in 1987 that I would have a sale. And my first sale was a little bit crude because I didn't have an auctioneer. I mean, I did it myself, but it was a very successful sale, and I had about 25 invited buyers that all wanted to come and purchase genetics that year, and so they were all at the farm, and I had students from Hawkeye just put the lambs in the middle of a little arena that we built out of straw bales, and we had a sale, and it turned out really good. And so by 88, then we went to a full-blown sale. I built a new shed and hired an auctioneer, and from then on, it was obvious by the early 90s that I needed more animals to service the interest that people had in my breeding program. So I started with my first satellite flock was a past student, Terry Chapman, and then it just grew, and I ended up over the years with 4 different satellite flocks, and most of those flocks had somewhere between 50 and 60 ewes in them. I owned the sheep. They managed and lambed them out. I furnished the stud rams. I paid all the cost of promoting and advertising and selling them, and then we split the sale proceeds. So that allowed me to have a couple hundred head in my sales in the latter years before I moved down here to Hawkeye.
Right. Well, and at some of your history and growing up through these different flocks and different things, you kept that desire for clean pedigrees. You kept a desire for carcass traits. You kept those desires for that. Tell us why. Why do that when a lot of the sheep world is going the club lamb way?
Well, I definitely walked a different path than most, and even some would say that I kind of established a breed within a breed. But, you know, my background is cattle, and that's what I taught while I was at Hawkeye. I mean, as a 2-year college, you're going to handle more than one particular species, and I taught dairy, beef, and sheep. But the main interest I had was cattle, and my awareness of what it took in the late 70s and early 80s to bring the beef industry back to a profitable situation was the word moderation. And I know you students many times called me Mr. Moderation, but I believed in middle-of-the-road livestock. I don't think we need 1,800-pound cows, and I don't think we need frame score 8 or 9 cows. I think we need 4s, 5s, and 6s, easy fleshing. And I took that same mentality into my decision of how I was going to raise Suffolk sheep. And so and of course, early on, I mentioned how the Iowa Ram Test had influenced me and how the National Lamb Show and carcass events like that had influenced me. So I cared very much about producing an animal that had the ability to grow and the ability to open up a carcass that was desirable for the consumer. And it just kind of made common sense to me. And fortunately, I've had customers that have followed my lead and believed that maybe that was a useful way to go. And I hope a lot of my customers have been able to market livestock better because, you know, they've got the carcass traits, they've got the maternal traits, they've got some of the performance traits that we've kind of emphasized. And, you know, there's extremes in anything, but I think moderation says a lot, and I really, it was a name given to me by a good friend of mine, Dr. Charles Parker, who was with the American sheep industry when he had a group of Brazilians visiting my farm. But we were talking, and I was visiting about all the different traits that I try to select for. And Dr. Parker says, you know, Bob, a good slogan for your flock would be the home of balanced genetics. And I said, you know, I like that. And so ever since then, I got his permission, of course, but I've taken the slogan of we're the home of balanced genetics. We don't, when people call me and they want a really extreme frame sheep or a really extreme heavy muscled sheep, or they want extremes in any way, I say, you're really talking to the wrong program. I'm all about combining as many traits as we can and making it a complete sheep.
And yeah, as you said, some people came along with you. If you go on the website there, you can see the past sales, and you can see that a lot of people have followed along with you, and a lot of people have really bought into this program and really seeing the value in those sheep. So,
well, you know, I feel very gratified that my customer base is very loyal, even though I've indicated to you before we started visiting on the podcast that back in Iowa, we would have maybe 125 to 150 buyer numbers out, and there would be a crowd of a couple hundred people at the sales. Since I'm down here in southern Missouri, it feels like I've moved out of country because there's an awful lot of people that I haven't heard from since I've moved down here. But I'm still selling the same kind of livestock that I have for all these years. And yeah, I mean, there's a numerous amount of breeders that are really pretty close to what I'm doing. They're trying to produce the same genetic lines that of course have made my program successful.
Bob, along with your sheep, you have helped so many youth with scholarships, so many youth with leadership opportunities through scholarship programs, through helping them put on shows, to helping them put on sales and travel seminars. And I know I just gave you a broad group there, but will you tell us about a few of those things that you've done, and you just have a passion for youth and helping youth and setting some of those things up, and what are some of those things that you feel are some of your major accomplishments, I guess?
Well, probably the largest accomplishment I had to do with the cattle industry when I started the Iowa Cattlemen's Beef Extravaganza, and it's still going on back up in Iowa. But we, you know, I guess it was a combination of my working with a representative with a pharmaceutical company, and he wanted me to furnish some students to help with the display at the Cattle Congress, which is a show there in Waterloo, Iowa. And before long, we got to talking, and I said, well, if we're going to bring youth into your display, we really need to maybe do something further down the road. And the initiation of that concept of getting business industry to put money into scholarship funds to allow youth to go to college started. And it started in the early 90s, and the Cattlemen's continued that in Des Moines, Iowa, but our first 4 or 5 years was there at the college on the school farm. And then we were giving away about $15,000, which was recruited from industry to youth to go to college. Then I started the same kind of program with sheep, and it was an all-day event where youth would be involved in 10 different disciplines, everything from physically handling livestock through a working corral to setting down and talking about promotion and advertisement, to doing carcass evaluation on live animals, to marketing bulls. I mean, there was numerous different disciplines that were expected out of those youth in that event. But as you say, I've always had a strong interest in working with youth. I wouldn't have taught for 31 years if I didn't. But presently today, I still have junior credit programs. I'll be awarding over $1,000 of credit to youth that have bought livestock last year's sale, and they've shown them and they've done well, and that's all kind of spelled out in my junior page of my website. But I also have just a free credit this year. It's just $1,500 to 4 youth, 2 $500 credits and 2 $250 credits, and those are broken into the junior division and the senior division, 13 and under and 14 and older. And we can't forget that it really, without youth, we can't expect any future to have a bright look. So, I mean, you've got to take time to work with youth. They are our future, and that's my philosophy. So I really enjoy that. I enjoy getting pictures from young people that have done successfully shown an animal that they purchased. So that's where I'm at today. But when you ask the question, my involvement with scholarships goes way back to when I started that cattle program for kids in Iowa and the upper Midwest.
Right, and so many things, so many other things that I'm sure you maybe have even forgot about. Some of those things that you've done. You've done
Sadly
so
to say, that might be true.
When you're that involved, some of those things I'm sure are will slip by, and when you've done as much as you have. So, Bob, you started not only with the youth, but you started the adult lamb and wool programs when you were at Iowa at Hawkeye. Explain that just a little bit, if you would.
Well, of course, the big adult program in the nation for sheep was at Pipestone, Minnesota. And Dwight Holloway started that, and Mike Caskey followed him, and they had a very successful program, and it really bolstered the commercial industry in that region. So there was a number of us in Iowa that wanted to get the same kind of a program going. So the state was divided into 4 quadrants, and I had the northeast quadrant, and we got money from the State Department at the time to do adult lamb and wool programs. And so I stepped out of the teaching position in the day program and was full-time for 4 years just working with adult producers in the northeast quadrant of the state of Iowa to make 6 farm visits a year. We'd have 1 monthly meeting every month. We would have records. Every producer enrolled in that program had to keep good records. And so, yeah, it was kind of a change of pace, because I had taught 31 years, but 25 of them with the day program, and then I went into the adult program for 4 years, and then I bounced back into the day program at the end of my career. But we talk about youth. I mean, one thing that you should remember, I wasn't your coach, but you were a part of something that I started at Hawkeye, and that was the livestock judging team. And I look back in my career, and I can't say anything was more influential on my life than coaching livestock judging team members. The gratification of when we would go out and win a contest or do well, and youth would do well, that was very, very gratifying. So livestock judging teams at Hawkeye never maybe were as dominant as a few programs in the nation, but they were always in the hunt.
Mm-hmm. And started by you, and that's a great thing. You talked a little bit about the sheep traveling with the adult program, and you've done travel seminars for students for both sheep and beef, and I know went back out to Iowa one summer just to go on one of those travel seminars. Do you have some of those memories from those travel seminars that you want to tell us about, and just some of the more interesting stops or different things after you introduce what those travel seminars are?
Well, yes. I mean, you go back to the beginning of when the program at Hawkeye started. I mean, we were a tech school to begin with. When I came in '69, it was known as Hawkeye Tech. Then it later became Hawkeye Community College. But when you're dealing with young people ages 18 to 21, some of which have a strong interest in academics and some would rather do more hands-on. And I thought getting you out in the industry, having you meet producers who are successful was going to be more impactful than sitting in that classroom. So maybe it was the fact that I didn't want to be just a classroom teacher that I really put emphasis on travel seminars. But I really doubt that there's anybody in any two-year college in the nation that's done more traveling in a van with students. There'd be beef or sheep trips, but well, we used to take a week's trip with our students enrolled in animal science, and we used to go to 3 or 4 state tours, and we'd stop at cattle, we'd stop at swine, we'd stop at sheep, we'd stop at dairy, and we'd maybe just stop at manufacturing industries that are ag-related. But those 1 week trips were very memorable. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you all the things that we had to deal with when you get young people out on the road and you're traveling with them. And I did that with the judging team, and I did it with travel seminars. And then later on, I started to specialize in just taking my beef students or my sheep students on 1 week trips. And I don't regret it. It was one of the ways that I felt that educationally we could reach the depths of the minds of as many young people as we could possibly reach without getting them bored stiff in a classroom.
Right. Yeah. You knew at least one student. You knew what he wanted. So I sure remember. I remember going on the one. I don't remember where all we went, but I remember going on a couple of them. The one that we did that summer, the week long, and I don't, like I said, I don't remember exactly where all we went. You probably remember better than I do, but I know you put us in front of some of the leaders in the nation of the beef and the sheep world, and I remember a trip to Wyoming where we went out to look at heifers and bring those heifers back for the program at Hawkeye.
Right.
And
well, that was that stop was Schroeder Cattle Company, and that was in western Nebraska. And Frank Padella, who was an Iowa boy, and he got hired by the Schroeder family to run their cattle operation. It was a composite operation, so it was in the current cutting edge of the beef industry, but we were looking at composites that had Galvey and Simmental and Angus and so forth, the genetic composition to allow them to be, maximizing hybrid vigor. What I talk about the Schroeder Cattle Company is we wanted to expand that same kind of genetic prowess there at the college. So I got approval to buy 5 to 6 heifers a year for about 4 or 5 years from Schroeder Cattle Company. And I would take students out there. Frank would have maybe 70 heifers in a lot. Mm-hmm. And I hand out cards to you guys, and you guys would all mill around the heifers and pick 5 or 6 of the numbers that you liked. And then when we got all done, we'd lay all the selections by all the students that were in attendance out, and we would come up with a consensus of the heifers that we wanted to take back home. And the nice thing was Frank Padella allowed us to take whatever heifers we picked out of that group. I mean, we were supposedly picking the cream of the crop out of 70 heifers, but those were trips that were quite impactful in terms of the teaching herd there at the college.
Right. I remember one of those. We had a debate on which heifers should come back and maybe which ones shouldn't, and I think we actually talked you into one of them that maybe you weren't in great favor of. I don't know.
Well, you students had a voice.
Right.
I wasn't a dictator.
Right. No, not at all. So that was great, and that's one of those trips. I remember quite well. So. Still on and very active on some different boards and things. You're on the United Suffolk Sheep Association board, the Iowa Industry board, the Farm Bureau Sheep Advisory, those things still. That's all correct, right?
Well, you're incorrect in saying I'm still on them because
Okay.
I'm getting up in years. But I did serve on all those boards. Yes, probably the American Sheep Industry Seed Stock Committee, and I chaired that for 4 years. That was one of the most prestigious boards that I was on and served as chair of. But I hopefully done my part in being a leader and a supporter of all the organizations that were supporting what I represented in the industry. So no, but today, Andy, I can truthfully say I'm pretty much retired. I guess we haven't talked about the fact that I used to actually judge livestock shows, but
Right.
in my heyday, I was judging quite a few shows. But this is, like I say, I'm kind of semi-retired from being exposed to a lot of people down here in Southern. I had up in Iowa, but I'm still, I guess, a thoughtful person in terms of visual appraising what I use for breeding stock and so forth. But the days of judging livestock shows for me are past, and I do miss it because I had the opportunity to judge a good share of them.
Right. I remember. I remember you took a young man to Exarban, and when you judged the Market Lamb show out at Exarban, and so.
I remember that. I had laryngitis. Remember?
Right. Yes. Yes. That was another great trip that you influenced me at that, and so just a good stop and another neat experience. And I remember we were sitting around one of the tables at Exarban, and there was some of the major leaders in the livestock industry sitting around there, and here sat this 19-year old kid, and I remember the things that you guys were talking about, and different things, and one of them was the 5 breeds. You had to have 5 breeds of beef cattle, what would those 5 breeds be? And so I remember those, and remember that. So again, just more of you impacting youth. And you didn't just judge in the United States, right?
No, I had the fortune of doing quite a lot of work in South America and in Mexico, and I didn't ever judge in England or in Great Britain, but I did several trips to Great Britain to view genetics over there. So I mean, the world of sheep has allowed me to see and contact a lot of the world people that are involved. And New Zealand is another country I've been to twice because of my involvement with the Seed Stock Committee with the sheep industry. But the most judging I did was in Brazil and Mexico. I was in Brazil 4 times and in Mexico about 8 times.
That's great. That's great. And then, all while doing all of those things, you're still running your own sheep flock.
Yeah. Well, that was when Barb was kind of given the responsibility to oversee the home front, and my son Ted and my daughter Flo were there. So, but as you remember, I hired students to take care of chores and do a lot of the work. I didn't like to leave during the winter months, during lambing time. Like when I went to judge in Denver, leaving the home front during the lambing season is not easy, or judging Houston or Fort Worth, and those shows are in the spring. And, there's so much going on out in the barn, and it doesn't really pay that well to start with in terms of judging. But when you actually have livestock that are at risk when you're gone, it really can be costly. But I did it anyway, and my family supported me, and I was very blessed to have them help me.
Right. Yeah. And again, developing different leadership and leadership skills. I know a couple guys that when they were looking for a job, they said, "Hey, I've worked for Bob Kimm," and they said, "You work for Bob Kimm?" "Sure have." "Well, come on." And so led to a lot of others successful futures, or I guess, or successful lives and different things. So just all the influence that you have is great, and I still admire it and enjoy it years later since I've been out there with you. So Bob,
Oh, thank you.
we'll talk a little bit about the sale and the sheep and different things like that, and you were, like I said, you were in Dysart, Iowa, and you had that flock there, but now you have moved down to Missouri. And will you talk about that just a little bit?
Well, again, the move was again because my wife, my current wife, wanted to be a little closer to her grandchildren in Louisiana and also in a little warmer climate. So we kind of compromised and settled on southern Missouri. But when I made the move down here, I did even cut back my flock more than 50 ewes, and I cut it back to about 30. When we moved here, I'm back up to about 40 right now, but we're the big adjustment for me is getting used to fescue. Endophyte toxicity has thrown me a lot more challenges than I thought it would, and so but I've learned to deal with it, and we're managing our sheep a little better this year than I did the first year I was down here in terms of dealing with the toxicities. But I've got 40 ewes right now. My genetic base is pretty much Kimm bloodlines because it's hard for me to find an outsourced, completely outcrossed ram from a breeder that's got maybe the same exact mentality that I do. And the emphasis that I put on carcass traits and on maternal values and on structural correctness, not saying there aren't breeders that do that, but it just has been a little bit easier for me to breed within. So like this year, my sale represents about 3 bloodlines, and they're all rams that I raised myself. But some of the most influential breeders that have put genetics in line for me to use starts with guys like Willard McLaughlin out of Colorado, Tom Slack out of Indiana, Bob Fields out of Indiana. These were all people that really gave me pieces that helped me construct what I'm doing today. And Bill McCauley out of Jim Van Dyke up in South Dakota are people that I've used some genetics from in recent times. They bought a lot of my genetics as well. So, and I'm really a fan of inbreeding or line breeding, and people I will read this in textbooks. Always say crossbreeding and line breeding and inbreeding works in cattle, but it doesn't so well in sheep, and I don't see that as being true. I've line bred quite a lot in my years of doing this, and what it does is it just simply solidifies traits and gives you more consistency, where you can have more predictability. The outcome isn't going to be quite as diverse. So I really like line breeding. Surely there are some traits that will raise their ugly heads if you don't have a clean closet. I mean, if the closet's filled with some traits that you don't want to see, they can pop up. But you learn what you can and cannot do. So the 3 lines that I use predominantly to get currently where I was at, there was a bloodline that came out of Virginia. It was the Meadows 5211 ram, and Scott Greiner, who's at Virginia Tech, gave me the lead on that ram, and that had a great impact on what we're doing today. Gerald Howard out of Oklahoma had an aged ram that he bought from Tom Slack out of Sedalia. I bought that ram from Gerald Howard, and that ram had a great impact on where I'm at today in recent times. So, you know, I'm connected to enough people, and I talk to enough people that you try to find, genetically speaking, the pieces that are going to help you improve where you're at to make the next move. But you get to a point sometimes where you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And that sounds like you can make progress that way, but it's sometimes kind of a hurtful thing to to have things go back on you, but that's part of genetics. Not everything that we do, whether it be in cattle, swine, sheep, or whatever species, is always going to, every time we make a new introduction of bloodlines, is going to make an improvement. Sometimes it won't work the way we thought it would work. But for the most part, I feel like you would ask me, when was the time frame that you had what you thought was the best livestock? I really feel, I mean, I look at pictures, and that's the fun thing about having all the sales archived on my website. I can go back and look at what I've produced, and I think I'm producing some of the best genetics that I've ever produced.
Right. And you've done so much extensive testing, blood work, different things like that to make sure that these pedigrees are clean and the way everything should be.
Right. We started DNA testing for the spider gene back in, I'm going to say, the early 90s. There was a lab out of Minnesota that one of my past students, Don Swanton, told me that I could send blood up there to St. Paul, Minnesota, and get it tested for whether it had. This was actually the codon 171 is the codon that gives us resistance or non-resistance for scrapie. But I did the 171 testing, and then later on 136 testing for scrapie, and then later on Dr. Beaver in Illinois came up with a test for identifying the spider gene, and by the late 90s I threw that into the mix. So yes, I can't even begin to tell you how many dollars I've spent on DNA testing. I do not DNA test anything anymore, other than last year I actually sent in blood on all my females and all my stud rams, just to make me feel confident that they were all what I think they are, and they all came back RRNN. So, and people ask me, can they get a certificate that shows them that the animal they bought is RRNN? Well, I've got the records to show that all the flock is there. So it isn't that expensive, but it's about $10-12 a test. So, you know, I don't do it on every animal I'm selling, but yes, I've spent a good deal of time and money in. You need to be as a seed stock genetic source in this breed.
That's really neat that you've even got the blood work behind the physical work and the physical appearance on those sheep, and so just commend you on that. And I know when I showed up out there, I didn't have any idea about all the sheep testing and things, and you started talking all of those, and influenced me on that, and influenced a lot of other people on that, and some of them didn't quite understand it and catch on, but you can see that like you said earlier, you've got a following that's really believing in those things. So Bob, you wanted to talk a little bit about, we'll talk about these sale lambs, and you want to talk a little bit about some sire groups, and talk about those sires that have sheep that are in this sale, and sale April 25th on Willoughby Sales, and talk about those if you would.
Well, I think everybody has a programs. I mean, I get phone calls from people that say, I want a ram that's got a name. I want him to be released. I want him to have lots of muscle. I want him to have maternal traits. And they'll go on and on and on and on. They want breed character. They want bone. And when they get all done, I say, well, if you find one like that has all those traits in one package, you call me. I'll probably buy it. You know, you can't produce a complete, perfect animal. It's just not possible. You can come close, but when I give guidelines to buyers, I say, this is a piece program. Maybe you want more bone, and you can put emphasis on that. Maybe you want more muscle, and you need to select for that. Maybe you want more milk or want more longevity or want fleshing ability or want breed character. Put as many traits into one package as you can, but don't think that you're going to be able to afford to buy or even find that animal that doesn't have any opening faults, because they all have something that would change about them. The rams that I have now are really diverse in the fact that one is probably more compact, a more moderate framed ram. He's about a 35, 36-inch ram. He weighs about 300. He's not as big and heavy boned as I'd like to see, but he throws muscle consistently. And that ram is what we call Oscar. He's 17026. His lambs are all going to have ribeye scans that are going to be big. Last year, I think they averaged almost 4 inches, adjusted to 135. So when people want something that's more muscle driven, I always give them that bloodline as one to check out. I have a son of him that I raised last year that's 18069. We named him Trucker. My new wife really likes names, so we get names for all these bucks. But Trucker will add a little more bone, and he'll add just a little bit more size, frame-wise. But muscle-wise, probably not as consistent as Oscar, but if you look at this year's catalog, he put some big eyes out. There's one ewe lamb that's got almost a 5-inch adjusted ribeye, and that in the sheep world is fairly significant. And then the third ram that I like a lot of things about is a ram 17046 that my wife named Elvis, and that ram is a big ram. He'd be close to a 38-inch at the shoulder, weighs just shy of 400 pounds. He's a complete sheep in terms of a big ram, but his ribeyes won't measure up to the previous 2 rams I talked about, but they'll be longer bodied than the other 2 rams, and they'll be a little larger framed, and they'll have just a little more breed character. So each ram brings significant traits to the table. So when a prospective buyer looks at this offering, they need to look at these write-ups that are on these rams that I put in my website. And my website has been a really large part of my marketing tool. I mean, I've got junior page, of course, that explains the junior program, but I've got a page for my sires. There's pictures of those bucks. There's a paragraph written about each of those rams and what I feel they bring to the table. And I really encourage any prospective buyer that's looking at my program to be on my website, to go back, maybe archive some of the sales on the production sale page. They can actually archive 10 years back, and it's pretty interesting. And of course, there's lots of other additional information about where I came from and what my background is, as well as pictures of the flock over the years.
Right, yeah, and what is that website, Bob?
That's breedingsheeppage.com/Kimm.
Right.
And if anybody just, it seems to work pretty much this way. If you just Google the word KIMM Suffolks, my website should come up. But the official page is breedingsheeppage.com/Kimm.
Right, and maybe they can pause this if they would like and go to that website and look down in there, and it does have your sale catalog. It's got it on there as well. So, Bob, do you want to talk about a few of those individual sheep that you're offering here on the 25th?
Well, a couple rams that are actually lot number 1 and 2 that are getting a lot of people interested are rams 32 and 33. They're lot 1 and 2. They're by Trucker, and they both have pretty good sized ribeyes, a little bit more bone, but they're just massive, muscular kind of sheep. They're not as big as some of the other rams, but another pair of twin rams that are going to, I think, be more breeder type rams are lot 6 and 7. They're sired by the ram 46. We call him Elvis, but they're going to be a little bigger, longer, framier bucks, but they still have reasonably good muscle. They're in the upper 3s. So those are two sets of twin bucks that are, I think, standouts. Young ram that I really like down the line is he's ear tag 1. He's lot number 8. He's a trucker son, but he's a real complete sheep, and he's going to have, I think, a lot of interest. There's several, sons of trucker that've got a little bit more of a club lamb look to them. The lambs out of Oscar as well look that same part. You stand behind them, they feel their breeches are full and their inner twist is full. They've got the muscle. Then the lambs out of Elvis, they're a little flatter muscled, but they're longer, framier sheep with a little more breed character. So it depends on what you need in terms of an addition into your stud battery, but you need to study the pedigrees on those rams. And by the way, I really believe in pedigrees, and all my genetics are stud-wise, our extended pedigrees are on the website. So you go onto the sire page and you can click and get a 5-generation pedigree.
That's great.
Female-wise, the females are kind of the same response as far as sire groups. I've had people wanting to buy some January ewe lambs to show, and I always say it depends on what show you go to. If you're going to a show where they're going to have a more of a club lamb type judge, you probably need a trucker or a Oscar daughter. But if you're going to go to a show where it's going to be more of a little bit of a breeder type judge, where they're looking for a little more size and extension, then it should be one of the Elvis daughters. But the one ewe lamb that's got an awful lot of attention is lot number 39, and she's unusually heavy muscled, but she still looks really smooth. Her ribeye is just shy of 5 inches, 4.91. So that we adjust everything to 135, and the reason we do that is that's kind of a very typical market weight for our industry today. Although if you go to the East Coast, they like a lighter weight lamb. Superior, which is the largest pack in the nation, they're headquartered out of Davis, California, but they like a little larger lamb. Greg Ahart would tell you that he likes a lamb somewhere around, say, 150 to 165, which would give you a carcass weight of 75 to 85 pounds. But point is that there are some differences. All the sale offering isn't going to be the same. There are animals in there that have got a piece of this, a piece of that that's a little better than another one. So you need to decide what it is you want to bring into the program that you're working with.
Right. I went through those to put this video together that we're going to do, and I was clicking on those and saving those, and wow, what a lineup of sheep, and especially the females. I just really enjoyed those, and like you said, they're some of the bigger, longer, some of the more muscular, and some different things in there. So, but I want to commend you on a great set of sheep.
Well, thank you, Andy. One of the interesting entries, and I put her in late. She hasn't even been weaned yet. She's lot number 46. I mentioned line breeding. I did breed Elvis back to his mother this year. That is a set of twins that are not in the sale. I'm going to keep the daughter out of that mating. But I also bred Elvis back to his twin sister, and I put that daughter in the sale. She's lot 46. And you want to talk about a potential stud ewe. She should be something. She's just like I say, she's not weaned yet. She's not even shorn in the pictures, but I'll probably shear her prior to the sale because I'm going to wean her early this next week. But here's a little girl that's just built, square, thick. When you breed that close, when you inbreed that line, you don't know if it's going to turn out as good as it did in this particular case. But I don't like selling genetics like that, but I can't keep them all. At my age, I don't need to build too many more numbers. I just need to keep kind of stable. And she's one that I think is an opportunity for someone who wants a young ewe She's a February ewe, but she's going to be fun to watch.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Make sure you click on her there on the website. She is really flashy, really good. Yeah. Bob, give us some more details on this sale and about if we want to come look at sheep, how do we go about that? And picking these sheep up, different things like that. Will you give us that information, please?
Well, our place is open and welcome to anyone at any time. I just appreciate if they give us a call before they show up. In fact, I have a family coming tomorrow late morning to look at the consignment. I've had calls from a couple families that are one in Illinois, one in Minnesota that are planning to attend the sale. The question is, with the COVID-19 situation, we aren't going to have the open house like we had last year, so that's not going to happen. But as far as the barn is open to anyone to come in and look at any time, especially if you let me know when you're coming. Sale day, the animals will actually be lot number paint branded in the early morning, and they'll all be ready to look at by 12 o'clock noon. It's an online sale. They say the bidding starts at 7 a.m. Anybody that's been around online sales know that bidding usually doesn't even begin until the hour just before it ends, which I'm ending the sale an hour early. Most of the online sales end 7 Eastern, so that'd be 6 Central. I'm ending this at 6 Eastern, 5 Central time because there's people from, the local areas, and last year I had Oklahoma buyers here. I had Virginia buyers here, but when the sale ends, they want to try to still get a good jump on getting home. And I know I need to think about myself because I was told by one buyer that if you shorten the sale up too much, there's some people that might not be able to get home from work or whatever to bid. But it's a Saturday sale. I think it should work where people can bid online. But if they come here, they better have a laptop or a phone that's got good reception. We successfully handle Verizon really well here. I do know AT&T probably is not as good as some of the carriers, but with that being an online sale, most of the bidding will occur where people won't be at the farm, but they're welcome to be here that afternoon, and we'll answer any questions. I'll be outside. My wife won't be, but I'll be outside to visit with and answer any questions that anybody has. The animals will be, they're all shorn now, but they'll be, like I say, paint branded and on fresh wheat straw bedding.
Right. And you will also be handing out those scholarships on that day. Is that correct?
Right. I'll announce the day of the 20th. I had it, the deadline was the 15th of April, but I've extended it to the 20th. So any junior member that writes an essay, that's their entry into the drawing. And this year, the drawing will actually be done by me here on the 20th, and then I'll notify the winners via email. I have email. Most of the ones that I've received, the essays have come via email. Only one has come in the mail. So, and I have a phone number for that young lady. But what I'm saying is that information will be established on who's going to win those scholarships, or it's sale credit is what it is. It'll be notified to them via email on the night of the 20th, and then they can kind of know what they've got to spend. If they've got an extra $500 or $250, they'll know that. The ones that applied that don't get a call or an email from me know that they weren't successful in their bid. But I can't give everybody credit, but I certainly would like to. But anyway, the sale credit for juniors who do well, I mean, I've had 4 or 5 young people that bought lambs last year that showed them, and all they have to do, if they win their county fair, it's $100. If they win a class at the state fair, it's $100. If they win the state fair, it's $250 in the breed division. If they win the national junior show, which this year is scheduled to be in Michigan, but I don't know that it will happen. But If they win at the National Junior Show, it's $500. But those are credits that like I say, I'll be handing out over $1,000 sale credit to 4 different juniors who showed sheep that they bought in last year's sale.
Explain the essay just a little bit. We kind of touched on it, and then we skipped over that a little bit. How do they get the scholarship or the sale credit?
They write I say a 500 word essay, but I mean some of them come in longer than that, and some of them come in shorter than that. But the main thing is, I want to hear from these young people in terms of a little bit of their philosophy on why they want Suffolk sheep and what their futuristic program for their Suffolks would be. And I just like to know a little bit more about them in that regard. So I read them over, but previous to this last 2 years where we've just drawn the winner, I used to require a PowerPoint presentation. So for years, if you go on my website and look at the archives of the young people that have won, there's a lot more to winning scholarship or sale credits than just putting your name in a hat and drawing it out. I used to, being an old teacher, I used to actually have a 50, I called it a quiz, but it was closer to an exam. I used to have for juniors and one for seniors, a 50-question quiz that they would take. And Darren Shawley, who was one of my past students, used to come up and he used to grade them. I mean, it's a lot going on sale day, but we used to use that along with their essays and their PowerPoints. And so we would try to get young people that were very in tune with what this whole industry is about, having some goals and some objectives. That's where I'd like to put, the most part of the credit emphasis on is these young people that really kind of have their program and have some organization of their future of what they want to do. But today, in this current situation, it's just an essay sent to me in a Word document, preferably, because I can open those better than I can the Google packages. But Word document, essay. If they go on my website under the junior program page, they can see an outline of suggested content that essay could include, and then they just email it to bksuffolks@gmail.com.
And you say those are due on April the 20th, correct?
20th, yeah, April 20th.
Okay, so as we're recording this, we've got a few days, and they'll be able to have a day or two there that when we get this out, that they will be able to get those scholarships turned in. So again, what a great program, and even though you've been retired from teaching for a few years, you can't stop giving back to the young people.
Well, again, it's the future. We all have to realize that our youth are our future.
Right. Bob, what about picking these lambs up after the sale?
Well, of course, a lot of the people, I've had calls from several states where they're concerned about transporting the animal if they should get one, and we'll work with them. I'm not, at my age, I'm not going to say I'm going to deliver the sale sheep, because that's not going to happen. But I do have listed on my Willoughby site 3 of the national transporters. Bobby Mace is from out in California. Darren Klaus is from over around Indiana. Jonathan Liepert is from down around Virginia. And these people have all agreed to help transport anything that needs to go to far distant destinations. As far as picking them up, obviously they come to the property here and pick them up is an ideal situation, and I will take full responsibility for 30 days. And I look at a lot of these people and what they give in terms of time to pick them up, and I think that's about as long as anybody gives. I will feed and board and take care of these animals at my responsibility for 30 days. That's from the day of the sale. Anything after 30 days that's not picked up, I'll add a boarding fee of $2 a day. So I think that's relatively fair as a going rate. but I encourage everybody to check with me even on sale day, because I'll find out who actually shows up. And I've got a buyer from Iowa that is wanting me to let him know if I have a person from his area that's coming to the sale. Well, I do have a person from northern Missouri that's coming, so I've already given those people each other's names, and they're working that out. I have a breeder from Minnesota that's coming down, and I had a young man from Wisconsin call me this morning and said if he got something, how could he get it to Wisconsin? I said, there's a gentleman from Minnesota that's coming down, and I gave him their number, so they're communicating. So what I'm saying is just you need to check with me to see who's coming. I know I've got buyers from Virginia that are going to buy. I'm not too sure who's coming from Virginia, if anybody is, but there's going to have to be a trailer headed that way, because this one buyer is pretty serious about what he wants to buy. And I have a couple from Indiana that have contacted me. So I think that once we find out sale day who arrives, we can help some of the people figure out transport for them. And after the sale is over, if no one is able to connect, then there's those 3 people that I mentioned whose phone numbers are listed on the Willoughby site, that they can contact them and maybe make arrangements to have animals delivered.
Great. Good deal. Yeah, if you need somebody from any state, Bob probably knows them. So just a guy that knows a whole lot of people. Bob, we'll wrap this up here just a little bit, and anything else that we didn't hit on that you want to share with us about the program, about the sheep, about the sale, anything like that?
No, Andy, I think we've covered enough for one day.
Okay.
Anybody that's listening to this is probably already saying, when is this going to end, please? But it's been fun visiting with you. You know, you indicated wanting to talk to me and check in with me over the years. And I hear from a few students over the years checking back with me, but it's a real joy to connect with you guys and success to see. I mean, it was kind of an I'll mention this one thing. I had an old vet friend of mine from Iowa call me the other day, and both his sons are in the clubland business, but they work as a sales rep for major companies. But they said to him, do you realize how many Bob Kimm taught in the world of sheep that are out there still making their mark? And so he told me that, and I've done a little. I mean, I know I've got a lot of graduates that are still actively involved in cattle as well, but I can list 30 young people that are actively selling sheep. A lot of them are club lambs that I taught at the college, and that to me makes me feel really good.
Right. Well, that's great. Yeah, and influenced a lot more I know of and I'm sure of. So, Bob, it has been great visiting with you and great visiting about the sheep and about the flock. And I want to invite everybody to go to Willoughby Sales and look at the offering there. The offering will go up for sale on April the 25th. Also, go to the breedingsheeppage.com/Kimm. Kimm, and that is the website there for Bob and the flock. And what a great website that is. You want an education, spend a couple hours there on the website. And so just want to thank Bob for his time today, and want to wish you luck, Bob, on the sale, and wish those buyers luck on getting these animals bought that they want. And again, just what a joy it was to talk to you today. And again, just want to remind everybody, the sale, April 25th on Willoughby Sales.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, and we want to thank you for joining us on another edition of Before the Bid podcast. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Before the Bid. For more information and to learn more about upcoming podcasts and sales, visit us at beforethebid.podbean.com or Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram pages. For information on being a guest on Before the Bid, please email us at beforethebid@gmail.com or one of our social media pages. Remember, that's beforethebid@gmail.com. Happy sales to you, and we will talk to you next time on Before the Bid.